Hello and welcome. Thanks for being here today. My name is Gildo. I'm your host today for this webinar. Thanks everybody for being here. And just we'll be giving you some hints and tips about how to maximize system performance here today with the ATRIUM system. We'll be looking into the inputs and output menus and the relay menus to see what we can do with that. And I'll give you maybe a couple other uh, little things that we can discuss, if you will. So just give me a moment here. Get my ducks in a row. And okay. All right. So there's not that much information that needs to be thrown at you here regarding these menus. They're pretty fairly basic. You know, it's basic automation is what we're talking about here, and using external devices to be able to integrate, if you will, sensors or different components and be able to interact with them using the Atrium Access System. Thoughts that come to mind, for example, using a schedule to activate a relay, which then turns on or off. For example, we have a lot of traction in the educational environment, schools and school boards and so forth, activating a bell for the classes. That can be done with the relay menu and according to a schedule, and activate the bell for X amount of seconds. Um, Detectors, for example, when I walk into a room, have a motion sensor to be able to, for example, turn on the lights. And when I leave the room, the sensor no longer detects me, turn off the lights. So having, what is it? I think it's leads to minimize energy consumption, to be more energy efficient. So these are different options that suggestions that you could work with. Sump pumps for water level detectors in the basement in a condo. Talking about condos, walking into the locker area, we secure that area, and there's a bunch of lockers in this particular area. And when we walk into the area, once again, motion sensor, turn on a light, that kind of stuff. So in any case here, you can interact. So right now, I'm in the dashboard and I'm in the relays menu. As you see on my screen, if I go to the hardware tab and I go to system overview, it's the same information. I've got the relays, and here are the relays on my system. So different ways. And what I want to mention right now is at any point in time, if I want, I can highlight my relays, whether it's through the system overview screen or through the dashboard, and using relay menu there, I can simply highlight the relay in question and activate the relay, turn it on. So remotely activate and deactivate different options. To get it back to its normal status, simply go back to reset. So you can interact with your relays manually through the interface here. Uh, if we go into the menu, so once again, getting into the nitty gritty, uh, of course, naming your relay, it's always good to know what it's for. Sump pump on, off, whatever you want to call it, light switch. So giving it a name, the nomenclature in the system helps manage that system. Enabled, well, the actual relay itself, do we want it to be available? Is it enabled in the system? Yes or no? If you disable it by removing the check mark, of course, then there are no interactions. If you have macro commands or if you're doing anything with these menus, the system has now disabled this, in this particular case, this particular relay. All right. So the relays, and maybe I'm jumping forward here. Just give me a moment, and let me see. I think it's over here. And let's see. This one here will help us out here. Uh, oh, maybe not as well. It's in French. So let me see. Here. All right. Just let me zoom in on this a bit for you. Okay. What we're talking about, just to give you a better understanding, is the relays located on board. The menu that I'm in right now, if I go into the ATRIUM. Where's my ATRIUM? There we go. Now I'm in the relay number 1, okay, on the controller. So when I come back here, what I'm looking at, and this image might not be the best one. Let me help you out here and let me do a better job for you and try and get you a better image here. Let's try a controller. Let me see, we should have a picture of that in here. That'll be more useful. Do I have it here? No, I do not. And we're having a lot of fun here. Here we go. This one should give me what I'm looking for. And that's the same image. Oh boy, the control panel. Where is my control panel? And if I come back here, there we go. This one I think will be our best shot today. Sorry for the delay here. And I just want to, what we're looking at here, here's an actual picture of the controller. This is the A22. The A22K is exactly the same as far as footprint, and in this particular case, the hardware we're talking about. And the 2 relays that we're talking about are the white relays on board. They're dry contact, Form C relays, whatever you want to call them, normally open, normally closed. So relay 1 and relay 2. Now relay 1 by default follows the lock output for lock 1. Relay 2 by default follows the lock output for lock 2. What does that mean? When I swipe a card, if I have access, the lock output will be activated to be able to unlock the door, and the relay will also activate. Now, if you're not using an external power supply, that relay is just floating free. It's doing nothing else than going on and off. Now, if you want to use that relay for other options, is what we're doing right now. For example, a bell, for example, a bell schedule. We will disassociate the relay from the lock output to be able to use the relay. So the lock outputs are LK1 and LK2, and relay 1 follows lock 1, relay 2 follows lock 2. And these are the 2 relays we're talking about. I'm talking about on the system right now. And where's my software again? Here we go. So the reverse logic option here, in the case of the relay, can be very, very dangerous, if not confusing. I'll explain why. The reverse logic allows me to invert, as it says, it reverses the logic. So when I'm doing my field wiring at the actual panel level itself, and I'm connecting to the common terminal and the normally open, for example, and then you have the option to set to connect to common and normally closed. So that's your dry contact. Well, if I'm wired as a normally open and I come here and set reverse logic, what I'm telling the system is this relay is now in normally closed. So it's this logic. Make sure that you follow. If you're wiring your relay as normally open, this is what you want to do. If you're wiring your relay as normally closed, leave it as it is. In effect, in my personal world, I rarely touch this. I just do with the field wiring to know if I want that circuit to be normally open or normally closed. This is just a software to invert that whole process, that whole logic. So keep that in mind. The door lock, so relay 1 is the one we're talking about, and there's a little warning, if you will, that this relay is being used by lock 1 on the controller. So this is the serial number of my controller. And to use the activation, deactivation, unlink this relay from the door lock. So liberate the relay from the lock output, disassociate it. And then we'll be able to fiddle with the follow and activation mode. So once again, this is a shortcut. And this brings me right to the lock output properties. So this is the lock output for door 1 on my control panel. And the voltage lock, that's the LK1 in this case, positive and negative, and here's the relay. So if I want to use that relay to do other things and follow the lock output, I simply blank this out. Now, since we're here, let's talk a little bit more about the advanced options here. Simply to notice the voltage, the current being consumed by your lock device. So if you find, for example, mag lock, it's getting too warm or the strike, you can come here and in your lock output properties. Now this is found hardware, system overview, your controller, and the lock outputs, door locks. That's what we're looking at in this menu here. Okay, we just happen to go through the relay menu as a shortcut to access the lock output menu. The lock output menu is the door locks in this here. Okay. And here you're monitoring your device. So the idea here is I want to liberate the relay from my lock output by simply choosing a blank entity here and click save. Now my options are enabled to follow mode. So the follow mode, as it indicates, when the status, for example, if I choose an input, so I have a sensor, and that sensor, as long as the sensor detects and generates an alarm, follow the status. Now, my sensor in question, is that a normally opened device or a normally closed? So whatever the case may be, if it is a normally closed device, I'll set when the input gets opened, I want to activate the relay. If it's a normally closed device, I'll choose a normally open device, I'll choose input close. You want to choose the reverse status if it's normal status, it's normal state. Now here we're saying, well, which input did you connect that sensor to? So input 1 and 2, for example, and we have, as you see here in the list, the request to exit input for door 2, the contact for door 2, the request to exit for door 1, and the contact for door 1. Now let's go back to that screen, and this here I think will suffice for the moment. The inputs that we're looking at are these inputs here on the control panel. Okay, the request to exit and door contact inputs are located at the bottom of the panel beside the reader ports and just off to the left from your lock output. So here are your door contact input. Here's the request to exit input. There's your circuit for door 1. Now, in addition to the inputs for your 2 doors, for your door contact and request to exit for your 2 doors, which are located down here, we have auxiliary inputs, input 1 and input 2. And there's also output 1 and output 2. Now, when I'm looking here and I choose input 1, that's the first input on the terminal block located over here, up top. Okay? So if that input is a normally open input and it goes to closed condition, it's detected, activate the relay. The relay will follow the status of the input. You can also choose outputs. So the outputs on a system, either the output is activated or deactivated. And I'll show you what those are in just a moment here. So output 1. So what we're doing, if this output is deactivated, activate relay 1. As long as the output remains deactivated, keep the relay activated. When the output will be activated, deactivate the relay type situation. So this is Boolean logic. It's if and type scenario, and or type scenario. So these options, the best thing you could do is you're going to have to typically try it out, do a bench test, give it a shot. You need to get a good grasp of how the functionality will happen. You do some test runs, and like anything else, hopefully it'll work the first time right out of the box. Good on you if you do. However, don't be afraid to tinker. You will need to tinker more often than not. When you're tinkering with this, make sure that you're understanding the whole concept. Because the following person, the technician, or anybody that needs to troubleshoot will need to understand your logic, and this might be a key point of putting in the information. I was thinking of water detector sensor. Activate sump pump. Gildo. For example, You can't write a novel in there. However, you can put some quite precise information to help troubleshoot your system and maintain your system in the future. So devices that can be connected to the inputs on the panel. We also have a module that can add additional inputs and outputs to your system, the AIOM. Now, just to complete this process here, the follow mode, the schedules. This is one that I would use, for example, for the a bell schedule. You know, if you're in a factory, if you're in schools, whenever the schedule would become valid. Now, you can create your schedules, and every time the schedule becomes valid, it'll follow the schedule. Maybe this relay, for example, I'll use to turn on a light in the evenings. So when we get home, the French porch landing light is on, those kind of things. So from this hour to that hour, okay? So following your schedule. Now, moving forward, I think the follow mode, as long as the input is an alarm, the relay will be activated. As long as the output is an alarm or deactivated, whatever the status you choose, it'll follow the status. One of the applications that this comes to mind is in a security guard type scenario in a long-term healthcare facility, which might be quite pertinent for us these days with COVID-19 and everything, and senior citizens having a real hard time with this darn virus. Is in old age facilities, Alzheimer's patients, people with dementia. They tend to try and leave sometimes. They don't always enjoy being cooped in this building for hours and hours. And you know what the case. With that said, if someone does leave, we want the security guard to go to the actual door where the incident happened and to confirm that the door is now back secure and so on and so forth. So at the actual door itself, if there's a door situation where the person has left, we activated the relay. Well, we can put a key switch um, device by the door, and it's the security guard will need to go to the actual door and turn off the switch. So that switch would be an input to deactivate. The input is opened, which input, where's that switch connected to, and will activate and deactivate your relay accordingly. Okay. The action mode has two options. It's similar, and what you're doing is the follow mode kind of does two actions in one. It'll activate, and when the situation returns back to normal, it'll deactivate. Well, here you're taking even a more hands-on approach where I will decide what I'm going to do, when you're going to activate, when you're going to deactivate, and so on and so forth. So the same concept that we saw a moment ago in the follow mode exists here. Okay. And then you'll deactivate. When will the relay deactivate? Okay. So if it opens the input, my sensor detects, activate the relay, and when the input goes back to normal, the sensor no longer detects an issue, go back to normal. Okay, deactivate the relay. So that is basically what we do with the follow mode. Now here what we can also do is a timer. So instead of having the relay follow the status of the input, you can say, well, when the input goes an alarm, activate the relay for a certain amount of time, and you can see go up to several hours with this, and so on and so forth. So you do have quite a bit of functionality with this here. All right. So if you want a timed activation, this is how you would do it. Okay. So those are your inputs and output menus. So without having too much to say, the real key to that is your actual menus for your outputs to understand that. So those are your inputs and outputs. I just want to give you a couple heads up here, other bits of information uh, in the controller menu. So more hardware related, if you will. To monitor your system, I'd like to maybe show you the advanced options here. And there's lots of bits of information here that can be useful when you're trying to troubleshoot and wiring and so on and so forth. So your smart supply output, that's your lock LK1s, LK2s, how much voltage, is it powering it up? Is there, right now I have nothing connected to it, so that's why there's no current draw. The primary power is the actual power for the board itself. So the included power supply, is that providing enough voltage for my panel? The battery charge circuit, once again, my demo unit does not have a backup battery. Here you have the status of your battery. In the primary power here, the tab, this is where you can, in the system, define if there's a primary power failure, I want to send an email, for example. So what is the delay that indicates that there is a power failure? Do you want to increase this? Maybe you have a back UPS. I don't know. How many minutes do you wait before the system says, once primary power has failed, wait 2 minutes before indicating that the primary power is now off? How long, and this is the reverse, once it's failed, how long do I wait to say it's back to normal? As you see, by default, 0 is your standard setting. Typically not a big issue. However, you can fiddle with these. These are options that are available for you. You don't typically want to use these or need to use these, but they are there for you if you need it. The battery, this is the charge circuit. So the drip charge, drop charge, drip charge, I think it's called, to recharge your 12 volt 7 amp hour battery. By default, it's 250 milliamps. And it'll take longer, but the battery will last longer. It doesn't heat up as much. If you prefer, you can bump it all the way up to 1 amp to recharge the battery a lot faster, but it will heat up the battery. So 250 is the default setting. And how long does it take? What kind of amperage do you want to use for your panel to recharge that battery? In the integration, the more often than not, what you'll be coming in here for is to set your controller when you have multiple controllers on your network as a master controller. So if you're looking to add additional add subcontrollers to your system, you need to implement the master controller option here. When you're doing, we have integration with alarm systems, some key switch arming and disarming. When you want to enable that feature, you come here and you activate the option here. The CNIL is for our European market, for the Eurozone, for privacy, GDPR, where after X amount of events, we will, of days, I should say, we will erase the name associated to the person that actually generated an access event. So this allows the system to respect the privacy laws overseas. Now, if you think this is something that you could use here in North America, by all means, you can activate that. Now, here we have some integration with once again, this is a European product, Texacom alarm system, they're called. That's Texacom. And we've integrated their product on a more, instead of just key switch arming, we do have more interaction with that. And these are 2 options that will work with that specific integration with the Texacom. Okay. The license is new. This is in version 5 with the A22 crypto, the K version, where we will be able to load in floor plans. And here we see that we'll be able to add licenses through this interface in the software. You can also add system licenses through the web interface. Either or does the same thing. Okay. So those are the options for the advanced options. Over here, the network settings, if you want to set your controller with a static IP, is simply a matter of deactivating the DHCP, and this is the address we'll be using at this particular site. The gateway and all that kind of stuff, the software and web port. The module connection keys, those are your passwords for your controllers. By default, it's admin, admin in lowercase. And with the new version 5, the new crypto platform, we've activated the option for HTTPS. We've also, since we have integration, we have an SDK, you'll be able to force the SDK, if that SDK has not been updated with HTTPS capabilities, or once the connection to the ATRIUM platform, if you will, is done, we'll redirect the HTTP process to a secure process. And If you want, when you're doing HTTPS, your port is by default 443. This is configurable in the Atrium system. There are certain ISPs, internet providers, that will block certain ports, and one of the ports that one provider in Western Canada has done is they blocked the port 443 for HTTPS for whatever reason. I don't know why. However, if that is the case, your provider blocks certain ports. Some products do not allow to change your web port when you're doing HTTPS. With us, you have that flexibility. So, Yahoo. All right. The card enrollment. Once again, these are just details that typically you don't need to come to see, but just to give you some heads up, a little bit of additional information. When you activate card enrollment, that's with the MasterCard and the programming card. By default, when you've activated enrollment, the reader will start blinking twice red, twice green, and it'll stay that way for a 5-minute period. In other words, for 300 seconds. So the way the process works typically is I present my MasterCard, then I present the programming card, activate the enrollment mode. I add some new cards in the system by swiping a card in the system, an unknown card in the system that adds it to the database. When I'm done, I then represent the programming mode card to deactivate the enrollment mode at that reader. Now, this is just a timeout. Well, if you forget to deactivate the programming mode, the enrollment mode with your programming card, it'll wait 300 seconds and then deactivate automatically. So if you want maybe 2 minutes after, or whatever the value you think would be more convenient for you. With the Wiegand readers, we are still compatible with Wiegand. We also have a reader, a USB enrollment device, the the R125 USB. And when you're using that particular product, the cards that you'll be scanning, what format will they actually enter the card number into the Atrium system? Okay, so if you have the the R125 USB reader, this is something that you can come in to look, depending on your need. Most often, I think 26-bit fits the bill, but you do have other options here, 30, 44, and even track 2 for emulating magstripe cards. Time zone. Um, when the software connects to the panel, it'll automatically update the time zone. If not, well, here what we're looking at is if you have remote sites, different controllers in different parts of the state and so on and so forth of the country, you can change the time zone for each individual controller by going through these menus. And here, the daylight saving time, that's your spring forward and fall back in the beginning of the summer, end of summer type thing. So when do you want to do that? We've said it. This is pretty much a standard, but different countries, different provinces, different states, especially in the Midwest here in North America, some don't implement. Saskatchewan does not have a daylight saving time. They just stay at the same time 12 months a year. I think there's a couple states stateside that do that. So this here, if you don't want that. And typically when you are moving forward here in Canada and North America, it's on the Sunday, the first Sunday following the 7th of March. So in effect, so whenever Sunday appears after March 7, this is when we will advance 1 hour in the spring. And at the end of the year, the fall, the first Sunday of November, go back 1 hour, and at 2 o'clock in the morning. What is the offset? How much time do you change? If I'm not mistaken, I think I know that here in Canada, Newfoundland only has a half-hour offset, and I think Brazil is the same also, to my knowledge. So you can actually modify what is the offset. Do you spring forward an hour? Do you spring forward half an hour? That kind of stuff. Last but not least, the email settings when you are using Atrium to forward emails. And this is a great stuff for if you want to do service contracts, maintenance, and all that. By all means, so these emails will really help you push forward. And what we're looking for here is what account will the Atrium controller, what email account will it use to fire off an email when I've set up the system to, for example, on an alarm condition, send an email. So what is the account? Okay. For the hardware end of things, that pretty much covers it. be creative. Tinker with your inputs, tinker with your outputs. This will help you add value to your system. Sensors. You could even, define this as a local alarm system without a dialer if you want. You just monitor their monitored points, their inputs, and you can react to it by activating outputs. So the sky's the limit with that kind of stuff. I just wanted to give you a little heads up on those different options, those different menus that we rarely go into, and hopefully that will have helped you maybe discover a few things that you weren't aware of with the system. All right, that covers it for today. Another week is done. Appreciate everybody joining in on here, and I'm glad you're enjoying the content. And stay safe, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye bye.